A very good evening and a warm welcome to all our viewers. I am Sneha from the Medical Communications team at DocNexus. Welcome to a brand new session of the Onco on Public Demand. Now, according to the WHO, non-communicable diseases claim 41 million lives each year, equivalent to 74% of all deaths globally. They are silent killers threatening health and gradually progress to an advanced stage. Finding rapid and sensitive diagnostic innovations to detect NCDs and addressing key risk factors is vital to mitigate the growing crisis of NCDs. To tell us more on non-communicable diseases, overview and implications for control, we have community medicine specialist Dr. Amitav Banerjee, Professor and Head, Community Medicine, Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College, Pune, India. Dr. Amitav Banerjee served in the Indian Armed Forces from 1978 to 2005. He started working as a professor and subsequently as the head of the Department of Community Medicine at Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College, Pune. Dr. Banerjee has published over 100 papers in the national and international journals and has undertaken several research projects. He has also delivered many keynote addresses at the national and international conferences. Sir, we welcome you to DocNexus. It's a pleasure to host you today.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to come on this DocNexus platform to discuss non-communicable diseases. I'll be giving an overview and implications for control. So as we are all aware, we are having the major public health burden of non-communicable disease nowadays. Not only in India, it started in the West. Now it is also affecting the countries of Asia and Africa, Latin America, particularly the rapidly developing economies like Brazil, India. They are the rapidly developing economies, and we are facing the higher life expectancy and also the increase in unhealthy lifestyle, unhealthy diet, and sedentary habits. So we are having a very rapidly catching up with the global burden of non-communicable disease. Then it has implications for all causes of morbidity, mortality, and quality of life. Adversely affected all these three, and based on what we know about it, the risk factors, the causes, the demographics, we can suggest or recommend some prevention and control measures. So this will be the scope of our talk today. So this is the last 30 years trends. It's a paper which has come in Lancet 2019, Global Burden of Disease for Non-Communicable Diseases. So there is over the past 30 years, there have been a rapid increase all over the globe of these non-communicable diseases. And this is now almost 43% global estimate that they contribute almost 43% of the disability adjusted quality of life years lost. So we'll just see proportion of healthy years lost. It was the earlier slide we saw it in 1990, it was 43% contributing to disability adjusted life years lost. That's a measure of quality of life. And over the 3 decades, that is up to 2019, the global estimate of daily lost is 64%. So almost a jump of almost 21% jump of non-communicable disease contributing to the quality of life, loss of quality of life. So disability accounts for 21% increase of the total disease burden. And so these are some of the comparative figures. Left side is the figure for 1990 and the right side is 2020 over the 3 decades. The blue color in the pie is the communicable disease. So in 1990, almost 50% was contributed by communicable disease, which has shrunk to 22% by 2020. And if you see the orange color right, that is the non-communicable disease like coronary artery disease, cancers, diabetes. These are the major bulk. Yellow is the psychiatric disorders. So these also are non-communicable disease and injuries. So almost it is 78% of the disease burden as on 2020 are contributed by non-communicable disease if you include psychiatric illnesses and road traffic accidents. And just 22% is the contribution by communicable disease. So even in our country also, we will be dealing more with non-communicable disease, which will also affect the morbidity, mortality for communicable disease also. As we saw in the recent pandemic, people who are having the comorbidities, they are more susceptible to mortality from communicable disease like COVID-19 or other respiratory viruses. So there is no hard and fast demarcation. So overall quality of life and overall vulnerability to fatality from infections also increase if you are got a large burden of non-communicable disease, as we are going to have. And what do we mean by non-communicable disease? Non-communicable disease are not passed from person to person, that is, person to person by contact. It may be passed from your family due to genetic causes, but not but not from person to person as the communicable disease. They are of long duration and these are a combination of factors. It may be genetic, it may be physiological, it may be environmental, it may be behavioral. So these behavioral factors are the lifestyle factors. Environmental factors are the air pollution, physiological and genetic factors. So even if you are having a genetic vulnerability, you can prevent by lifestyle. You can prevent the genetic manifestation of the disease by healthy lifestyle. So it's not bound in, it's not, it is not a final thing that if you have a genetic, if you have got a very strong history of, say, diabetes, you will get diabetes. You can prevent even in spite of a genetic inheritance by your nurture, by your lifestyle, by healthy living. You can, to a large extent, these can be controlled. So these are the 5 into 5. The top 5 non-communicable diseases are cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory disease, cancer, diabetes, and neuropsychiatric and neurological diseases. And below are the 5 risk factors. So major 5 risk factors which affects all the other 5 circles on top are the unhealthy diet, number 1, and the market forces and other things are aggravating these unhealthy diets or increasing this dietary factor. Then tobacco use. Tobacco causes large number of morbidity and mortality, contributing to most of the non-communicable disease. Then harmful use of alcohol. You see road traffic accidents, then cirrhosis of liver, cardiovascular disease, even diabetes. Physical inactivity. This is sedentary lifestyle because the work is, the type of work has changed. Most of the people are spending throughout the day on their laptops, desktops, and most of the occupations are getting sedentary, and even recreation is most of the transport and other things or use of automobiles, motorized vehicles, and air pollution. So these are the 5 major factors which are leading to the 5 major non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular, chronic respiratory disease, cancers, diabetes. So it's a holistic approach to this, can prevent number of chronic diseases. Who is at risk of such diseases? It's not only the elderly. In fact, elderly in India and many Asian countries of our earlier generation, they are more healthier as far as they are less obese, perhaps more healthier than the middle age who have come into affluence recently. They are more obese, So it is of all age groups are vulnerable, particularly as I said, the developing economics like India is one example, Brazil is another example, often associated with older, but evidence shows deaths that will occur between the age of middle years. In fact, uh, in countries like Asian countries, African countries, particularly Asian countries, they have found that non-communicable disease like diabetes or coronary artery disease can strike a decade earlier compared to Caucasians because of certain genetic factors. Because there is a hypothesis of a thrifty gene that areas of the world which had faced famines in the past, like India has faced Bengal famine, famine in Agra, Bihar famine. So those survivors are having a genetic predisposition to accumulate fat in the central obesity in the trunk. If you see the Asians, the fat distribution are central obesity around the trunk. So they in the later years are more likely to get metabolic syndrome, which predisposes them to diabetes, coronary artery disease. Metabolic syndrome includes central obesity and increased insulin resistance and poor glucose tolerance. So these people are more Asians because of the past deprivations, maybe genetically. Then there is another hypothesis that childhood malnutrition and including intrauterine fetal growth retardation can predispose them to metabolic syndrome in adulthood and central. This is known as Barker hypothesis. And unfortunately, in India, we have got a high rate of intrauterine growth retardation. 20% of newborns in India are low birth weight. That shows they have faced intrauterine growth retardation. Almost 30% of our children are below 5 years have got underweight or malnutrition according to the latest National Family Health Survey 5. So these people, when they grow up, they will be more likely in the adulthood suffer from metabolic syndrome and central obesity. So we have got a genetic handicap. Then premature deaths, say in adulthood, non-communicable disease impact over 85% are estimated to be from middle income and low income countries. So it is not that earlier we used to think non-communicable disease are disease of affluence. Now increasingly it is becoming a disease of rapidly developing economies, and even in the developed countries, the blue-collar worker are more likely to get the coronary artery disease and diabetes and other NCDs because of lack of awareness and unhealthy diet. Whereas those who are upper income people, they are going to the gym, they are doing physical activity, they are maybe, many are converting to a healthy diet because of the awareness. So it is the people who have come into money recently, they are. Then children, adults and the elderly are all vulnerable to the risk factors contributing to non-communicable disease from unhealthy diets, physical inactivity, exposure to tobacco and harmful alcohol. Children and adolescents, when they form the habit in young age in school and college, they track forward into adult life because they are addictive. A person with habituated tobacco in early age will be a smoker for longer years. Similarly for alcohol and unhealthy diets also. Because unhealthy diets are due to market forces. Every day there is a birthday, there are particularly sugar. Sugar is supposed to be the new smoking because sugar consumption is associated with a lot of chronic disease problems, and particularly it is addictive also, but it gives a spike in blood sugar and it falls down. Again, there is a urge to take more sugary foods, then sugary drinks. That is also a major from youth. Role models, sports personnel advertising this sugary drinks, carbonated drinks full of sugar. So these are very, very addictive and they have a very adverse effects in the long run. It increases the childhood obesity, middle age, which may persist into adult age. This is a historical figure, Marie Antoinette, the French queen, who said famously that if you don't have bread, eat cake. And today the newly rich people in economies, they are following her advice. They are eating cake nowadays. As I said, their birthday has become very common. Cake is Western culture. We are adopting very fast. Mary Antoinette advised the starving masses 18th century to eat cake. Today, the poor are following this advice to the letter. The rich eat salad and hit the gym. As I said, the people who are aware, who are rich, they are hitting the gym, they are becoming vegan. The poor are gorging on cakes, hamburgers, and pizza. And these have got very strong market forces. And right from young age, school starts. And in our department at Devi Patel in Pimpri, we did a survey of diabetes in the rural area, also in a field practice area near Alandi. We found that almost 10%, 9 to 10% people we could detect diabetes. Out of them, 50% were not aware of the diabetic status. And they had higher risk factors of non-communicable disease. The poor people in the urban slums and in the rural areas, they had higher proportion of them had central obesity and waist-hip ratio, which was not favorable compared to the urban middle-class areas. So probably it may be, as I said, people who are poor, who are deprived in childhood, in adulthood, they develop the central obesity. So we have published papers, we have given the reference, and we have found that 50% of diabetes were not aware of the diabetic status. So this is a hidden burden. So then, as on today, globally, there are 2.1 billion are overweight compared to 850 million malnourished. So with the improvement in unhealthy foods, with increase in unhealthy foods, the undernourished, more than the undernourished, more people are, 2.1 billion are, more than double are overweight. And here also we saw in the Western countries, the pandemic, as I had mentioned, that it is not that overweight and obesity are risk factors for, earlier we used to teach, I used to teach my students that overweight and obesity are risk factors for non-communicable disease like heart disease, arthritis, diabetes. But after the COVID pandemic, I am teaching that these things are overweight, obesity are risk factors for communicable disease like COVID or respiratory viruses. Because if we compare the death rates, the Western countries had 10 times higher death rates compared to the African and Asian countries, even with more number of vaccination. What we saw, we had tabulated also that those countries had 3 times higher obesity rates. European countries, American countries had 3 times higher obesity rates compared to Africa and Asian countries. And Japan and Brazil are 2 outliers, which also establishes the correlation of obesity with mortality from COVID. Japan had an older population because this death was more because of old age. Western countries had higher age compared to Indian and African countries, but Japan had a higher age profile even than the Western countries. But their mortality was 1/10 of the Western countries because their obesity was 1/3 as other Asian countries. So Japanese had a very healthy diet, and their obesity rates, if you see the WHO figures, they are 1/3. Similarly, other outlier also establishes Brazil. Brazil had a younger population compared to European and countries. Younger population, but their obesity was also equal to the Western countries. And they had mortality perhaps higher than some of the Western countries. So, Brazil, as I said, is also a developing economy, and India is going in that direction. Because in the second wave, in the first wave, we had very less problem in the COVID. But in the second wave, the middle class were affected, and they had higher obesity rates. And we know that we had a little tough time in the second wave because the different strata of society, which is becoming more westernized, which is becoming more unhealthy. The laptop class who were working from home, they did not get the infection in the first wave, but the second wave when they got, they were the more vulnerable people. So they had a slightly higher impact. Half of humankind will be overweight by 2030. This is the prediction. And famine and undernutrition combined killed 1 million people, while obesity killed 3 million. So this is the danger we are facing, and which is totally behavioral lifestyle. So it requires more than medication, more than medical intervention. It requires people's participation. Unfortunately, people are becoming more passive nowadays because they don't want to exert. They are overestimating the capability of medical technology, and medical technology is also obliging them. They started with, now we have got bariatric surgery, and now the drugs are coming up. Anti-obesity drugs are in the market, and but actual is the people's behavior from young age. Healthy lifestyle will be more sustainable, because this medical intervention may have its own side effects and it may not be affordable for all. But that is the way things are going. Who is he? This is a mathematician, philosopher, Nobel Prize winner, Bertrand Russell. We saw a historical figure, Mary Antoinette, and we have Bertrand Russell, who has predicted the 3 stages of humankind. He had said that there are 3 stages of conflict. First stage of conflict is man against nature. Man means human. That time it was not so, the language was not gender sensitive. So man and nature, environmental infection. So we had man and nature. First conflict, as far as health is concerned, we were biological enemies, vectors of disease, communicable disease, and other famines and other things. So it conquered. And once man conquers nature, the second phase of conflict is man versus man. We have violence, we have wars, we have homicides. So man attacks man. And the third stage of conflict, according to Bertrand Russell, is man versus self. Self means you start self. You are your own enemy. And that is the lifestyle disease. So humans are now becoming their own enemies by their sedentary habits, by their unhealthy diets, by their not doing adequate physical activity. So we have arrived, according to Bertrand Russell. So this is the message great philosophers had predicted. And in health also, as applied to health, we are seeing initially communicable disease, we control communicable disease, then we had violence, wars. Now we are having less war, we are having more prosperity. But once we have more prosperity, we have become our own enemy by self-indulgence, overindulgence, and passivity. We want medical intervention to cater to our luxury results of our overindulgence rather than working towards good health. And these are the other social changes, the larger picture. Earlier, we used to go on bicycles, long distances. Young people, we never even used to had a two-wheeler. And physical, the advantages was we used to get physical activity, we are open air, and we were getting vitamin D. Then vitamin D deficiency also contributes to large number of non-communicable disease. Vitamin D deficiency associated with diabetes and arthritis, osteoarthritis, and a number of immunity. In fact, during COVID times, they found vitamin D deficiency can predispose to more infections, and not only more infections, people with vitamin D deficiency had low response to the vaccine also. So it has a vitamin D has a good role in immunity. And we also did a study in our field practice area among the young people and elderly people. We found the young people had 50% more vitamin D deficiency prevalence than the elderly people. The young generation, particularly our students, they are not going in the sun, they are not going in the open, they are having vitamin D deficiency as per a study we had published. And they are going in automobiles, sedentary, while commuting. You are not doing physical activity like when cycling. The space is closed, so there is more and lack of vitamin D. So these are, and then the workplaces were very open and spacious. You have to walk to long corridors. In that only physical activity. When we had hospitals, in fact, I served in the old hospitals all my life, in big military hospitals from British time. They had huge verandas, so going from one ward to the other, you had to have get physical exercise, open, spacious, and you have to climb stairs. And nowadays, the hospitals are very cubicles and all. Besides the workplaces also. Workplaces like computer, you have small cubicles, so you don't have much space to walk around also. You are in one posture throughout the day. So workplaces now also they are putting on weight and getting food from Zomato and other things, so pizzas and cold drinks and soft drinks. So this whole environment is towards promotion of risk factor for non-communicable disease. The environmental factors, the social environment. The social environment has become almost non-enabling for healthy lifestyle. So this is I have taken because Japanese, I said, they had the leanest people. So this is a healthy meal. Or most of our Asian diets are having such variety of vegetables, fruits. So this is a healthy meal. They say you should take fruits and vegetables 5 to 6 helpings a day, and each helping should be about 70 grams. So almost 350 to 400 grams of fruits and vegetables a person should take, which is protective against a large number of, because of antioxidants and other fiber and other things. It is protective against coronary artery disease, protective against malignancies, and this is a healthy meal. But the diet nowadays is changing towards fast food. So very common fast food, American fast food, the burgers and fried chips and high carbohydrates. So these are the impact over the years, and this even during COVID time, people put on weight. Average weight of people in the West was gain of 5 kgs during the lockdowns and other things. So these are some of the risk factors, and I think the graph may be difficult for you to see. The high body mass index is the topmost. Topmost is high body mass index, and that is the highest risk factors. Then ambient particulate matter pollution, air pollution. So these are major problems in our big cities nowadays, Delhi and Mumbai. And high fasting plasma glucose. This is again, diabetes is a major problem now. In fact, recently, the 100 million Indians are diabetics. Childhood sex abuse and bullying, drug use, these are some of the risk factors. High systolic blood pressure, this is again a silent killer. Alcohol use, intimate partner violence, low physical activity, kidney dysfunction, high temperature, occupational risk, high cholesterol, low temperature, low birth weight. As I said, low birth weight is not only a childhood problem. Low birth weight and intrauterine growth retardation in the next generation, increase in non-communicable disease like metabolic syndrome and diabetes, and even coronary artery disease. Then unsafe water, sanitation, hand washing, smoking, child growth failure, again early child malnutrition, later disease in adulthood, household air pollution from fuels. So these are some of the risk factors which have been given for non-communicable disease. And with special mention of diabetes mellitus, 100 million Indians are diabetics. Recent report was there, ICMR study. And out 11% are frank, and more than that, 15% are pre-diabetic. So this is the time when a high-risk approach can check them, and by modification in lifestyle and diet, they can reverse the diabetes or prevent themselves going into the diabetic stage. Determinants of both nature and nurture. Nature is the intrauterine genetic. First is genetic. Then other is of course, environmental, malnutrition and environmental factor. So we have to take care of the present generation to prevent non-communicable disease like diabetes in the next generation. You have a mother who is having good nutrition, who does not have so that there is no fetal malnutrition. So you have a child who is born with a normal birth weight and a normal child nutrition, so that this whole generation can become healthy, can remain healthy. But what is happening that 20-30% of our under 5 are malnourished, 20% of our newborns are underweight, intrauterine growth retardation. So at birth only you have 20%, you will have next generation, you will have 20% or 30% diabetics. So you can imagine it's a long-term investment. There are no quick fix solutions. So you have to take care of the maternal health, child health, social factors like status of women, number of childbirths. So it is not controlling, piecemeal solutions is not going to work. Then malnutrition at both ends of the curve. Early age undernutrition, and adult overnutrition. So these are the factors for or higher burden of diabetes, even sometimes perhaps higher than the Western countries, because they don't have child malnutrition as much as we have. So these are the intrauterine growth retardation, early childhood malnutrition, as I said, Barker hypothesis, thrifty gene hypothesis, like regions which have faced famines in the past, they, according to Darwin's law, adaptation of those genes which can store fat during times of starvation. So, but these things are not turned off later. The people, large number of population carrying these genes will put on central obesity even when there is no famine, and they will accumulate fat. Central obesity and metabolic syndrome. So these are, of course, this hypothesis is a hypothesis. These are debatable. There are different schools. Some schools support this. Some schools say there is not enough evidence, because like in medicine, many things are always debatable. But this is also sounds quite logical when you see the epidemiology or distribution of these problems. Then non-communicable disease, again, we have got a chronic respiratory disease. It is relevant because we are having increasing number of increasing air pollution in our major cities. Injuries, we analyze asthma, interstitial lung disease, and chronic respiratory disease. So chronic respiratory disease after the non-communicable disease, the global after injuries, and these are the major problem: asthma, interstitial lung disease, chronic respiratory disease, and affecting more than 500 million people worldwide. And it shows an increase of almost 40% compared to 1990. So over the past 3 decades, 40% increase in the respiratory disease, which can be attributed to increasing air pollution because of industrial activity and automobiles. And so this requires a overall holistic approach like town planning, control of pollution factories, and fuel control. They are having electric cars, but again, whether it will solve the problem, we don't know, because electric car also requires energy for charging. And so these are chronic respiratory disease is the third leading cause of deaths in 2017 behind cardiovascular and neoplasm. The chronic respiratory disease is a problem. Then this global deaths, coronary artery disease. India, 2.5 million deaths are the cardiovascular. And as I said, in Indian population, Asian population, they get cardiovascular disease a decade or 2 decades earlier than the Caucasians because of a genetic and because of an unhealthy lifestyle and a rapidly growing economy. The large number of middle class people are increasing in bulk, and they are also individually also increasing in bulk. So they are the obesity is a major risk factor, and of course tobacco and alcohol misuse. Prevalence of death in urban population is slightly more in rural population, but as per our studies, we found that rural population are also fast catching up because the market forces are penetrating right up to the rural area. And in fact, as I said, many more blue-collar workers are becoming more vulnerable now compared to the people who are more urbanized. They are getting aware. They are on the point of reversing their lifestyle, but the lower economic class, while they come up, they adopt these unhealthy lifestyles. So these are social problems. Stroke is also a major problem. Again, all these have got more or less common risk factors, as we have seen the major 5 and the major 5 risk factors. And this is also part of cardiovascular ill health, like atherosclerosis, other things due to high carbohydrate in the diet and sedentary lifestyle. Tobacco is a major for stroke as well as coronary artery disease, neurological impairment, and they require very good early care. First 6 hours is very crucial to prevent permanent neurological harm. So we have to plan for the emergency health services also for stroke victims. So globally, the stroke is the leading cause of death and disability of adults worldwide, particularly in the less served area where emergency services for reversal of stroke is not available. So these are the types of NCDs and their prevention strategy. So this health promotion is the population approach. Irrespective of people at risk, you have to promote a healthy lifestyle. The second column is entire population, prevent risk factors and lower the population risk. So their best way is, of course, primordial prevention, that don't let those cultures, those regions which are not adopted the unhealthy lifestyle, adopt those cultures, like Western culture, particularly Western diet. But it is difficult when we are having a globalized world nowadays with very strong market forces trying to explore the clientele in rapidly developing economies. But we require strong messages from school and colleges for healthy diet and physical activity. Address all the population irrespective of race, because it is not static that if a young person, healthy person in adolescence is not overweight, but if the unhealthy lifestyle is adopted now, he will continue to adulthood. So, irrespective of the risk, it is a population approach which will bear the maximum results. Then primary prevention is people with risk factors, with one or more risk factors like family history, prevent development of disease at early age. So that is called the high risk approach. So that will be focused on only people who are smokers, say. That is a risk factor, you will concentrate on them. Or people with a family history, or people who are slightly obese, or people with a high BP. You will try to control the BP or control the blood sugar, so that it would be primary prevention or getting a heart attack or a stroke. But it would be secondary prevention as far as blood pressure or high glucose level is concerned. Then secondary prevention is early diagnosis and treatment, prevent disease progression or recurrence. And then tertiary prevention, of course, rehabilitation. So for secondary prevention and tertiary prevention, you require the curative services. So idea should be that if you have good health promotion and primary prevention, your primary healthcare approach or the health education approach will prevent many requirement for more number of hospital services, which are very resource intensive and cost intensive, and which may, as chronic disease, it's a cost to the individual also and cost to the society also. So the health promotion and primary prevention should be our thrust area. And these, of course, if the secondary prevention is a failure of primary and prevention or health promotion. And it should, we try to cut down on this. So these are some of the references which I have. So I think this is all.
Sir, it was an absolute pleasure listening to you. Very well presented session. Lots of key takeaways for our audience. We have a few questions from our audience. Let us address them one by one. My first question to you, sir, is how significant is the global burden of NCDs and how does it impact the healthcare systems and economies?
As I said, the global burden of disease, particularly non-communicable disease, the Western countries had faced it earlier and we are facing it. And the problem is that while the Western countries had the resources to cope, particularly the problem is going to be more grim in countries like Asia and Africa, because our curative health services are limited, as you know, even not only limited. If you see, we have not controlled or communicable disease also, because if you see the Western countries, they went by stages. Earlier, they had the challenge of communicable disease. Once they had conquered this communicable disease, then they are dealing with the non-communicable disease. But here we have got an unfinished agenda of communicable disease. As you know, every range, now we are having dengue problems. In Delhi, in Pune, we have got our problem of other communicable disease like Japanese encephalitis and malaria in some parts of the country. And of course, diarrhea deaths and particularly in children. And we have got respiratory infection deaths. So we have not, because of poor housing, poor water supply. So we have got a mosaic, epidemiological mosaic. So that's why, as I said, it is going to hit the poor countries more, the non-communicable disease. The Western countries tackled it one at a time. So here we are getting different types of disease all at the same time. So we are going to have a more major problem compared to the West.
Very well answered. My next question to you is, how can public health interventions effectively control and prevent NCDs at the population level?
Exactly. As I said, the public health approach have to involve the people. But unfortunately, what's happening is that the people are getting fascinated with high technology because naturally that is more glamorous. Like they are getting fascinated by bypass surgery. Now they are getting fascinated by bariatric surgery, particularly the affluent people. So they have a tendency to neglect the health. They think that all the answers or all their results of their indulgences or the good lives they are leading, they can be, medicine can take care and medical technology can take care of it. So if we have that mindset and if we have this every corner there are big hospitals giving packages, so the people will tend to neglect the health. They are lulled into passivity. So public health requires the people's participation for physical activity, for healthy diet, avoid sugar, healthy drinks instead of sugary drinks, and most important, that facilities for pedestrian, for walking, for cycling. You see, even if I want to use a cycle, if I want to walk, it is very dangerous. The facilities are not there for walking, for cycling, enabling environment for sports. So that type of thing has to be there. There are some European countries where people go and cycle. It's a culture. So here, that's why growing economies, the food first, food gets affected, then everybody wants to go by automobile, that becomes a status. So the health suffers. So gradually the obesity creeps in, the unhealthy food, sedentary habits. So it's a major problem. It's not a medical problem. It's a social problem. It's a public awareness problem. It's a health literacy problem. So we have to, we have promoted our technology. That's good. For people, of course, those who need it, it's good. But there is a limit to what technology can do.
Thank you, sir, for the answer. And my last question to you is, what are the challenges in implementing NCD prevention strategies and how can they be overcome?
The challenges are as I said, if you take off the health promotion or population approach, the first challenge is the market forces, because the market forces for fast food and for sugary drinks, they are the challenges. Then the challenges like role models. If you see all cricketers, nowadays they spend more time at the advertisement studio to promote the soft drinks and thumbs up and other things than at the crease, because they have from test match they have converted it into 20 limited overs, so they can just play few overs and then go and advertise and get more money. So this is a challenge because the youth looks up to the sports person. There was only one sports person, that is Gopi Chand, I think the badminton player, who turned down an offer for promoting this cola drinks and so there are few. We require more role models. So that is one challenge. Even now the Olympics you see, or the cricket stadium you see, they are the sponsors of the fast food or the unhealthy drinks. So this is a major challenge because it's a social environment. So it's very difficult to go against the current. The young age, the peer pressure is there. The role models are there. So this is the challenge in the population approach. Then the second is the primary prevention, means early diagnosis or secondary prevention. That is screening for diabetes, screening for non-communicable disease, screening for hypertension. So this challenge is because of mismatch of our resources, health resources. Particularly, most of our health workforce is in the urban areas. Rural areas where the 70% population are there, we may be having the lack of resources. So that can be a challenge. Because now the non-communicable diseases are spreading to rural areas also, because lifestyles are also getting, the unhealthy foods and other things are going to rural people are also adopting these unhealthy lifestyles. So these are the challenges of the health resources. And then of course the challenges we require, like we will have a stroke, which is increasing because of, we will have more cases of stroke and even coronary artery disease. The first few hours are very crucial. So challenge of early treatment, the ambulance services and the terrain, particularly in some parts of the country. Then other big challenge which we have still not been able to overcome after so many years is the maternal malnutrition and child malnutrition. We never correlate the maternal malnutrition and child malnutrition and fetal growth retardation with non-communicable disease. But as I have brought out, the more than 20% people are already doomed at birth to have non-communicable disease in adulthood because of intrauterine growth retardation and this Barker's hypothesis that those who have early uterine undernutrition, low birth weight, and early child malnutrition, they are more predisposed to have metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, central obesity in adult life, which predisposes them to non-communicable disease. So these are the major challenges. We have old challenges as well as new challenges, which as I said, the Western countries tackle one at a time. They never had child malnutrition. We are having child malnutrition. They had it earlier, then they tackled it. After the Industrial Revolution, they moved forward, they tackled communicable disease, then they are tackling non-communicable disease. But we are tackling all three at the same time. So this is a major challenge for us.
Thank you, sir. Indeed, an insightful answer. This brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Dr. Banerjee, for your time and efforts in putting together this interesting session. To our dear viewers, thank you so much for attending the session. Do share any more questions if you have. Until we see you again, take care and happy doc flexing.